today is going to be, and this next week also, a special day for our older kids. They are going to be dismissed along with our nursery age kids right now to go out into the atrium, and they are going to have a special workshop building Christmas presents. And it's a secret. I can't tell you who they're for. All right, so we're just going to have to leave that unknown for right now. So we'll dismiss the older kids up through 5th and 6th grade age to go on out now, and they'll be working on a special project during the message time for the next few weeks. And we will not have family ties for today and next week while they're doing this. All right, are you 3D ready? That is the question for the day. Now, for many of you that are into the Christmas shopping scene, which I think if we're honest, probably that's about everybody, one of the things that you may be shopping for this Christmas is 3D entertainment. Well, how many people have ever seen a movie in 3D? Raise your hand. Or something. Okay, that's almost everybody. All right. So it's kind of cool, isn't it? Because it's more than just a flat screen. It comes out at you and you can see depth into the screen. It's pretty neat. Now, in order to have 3D, you've got to have the right components. All right? You can't just, push a button on the remote control and turn your TV into 3D. It doesn't work that way. So why is that? Well, first of all, you got to have a 3D display that's capable of displaying 120 hertz. All right, now why is that? Well, that's because regular signal is 60 hertz. And if you're going to send two different signals, then you got to have 120 because each eye has to get a different image, right? Because that's how we see in reality, right? Our right eye, it sees a slightly different, see, everybody hold your hand over your left eye, right, and look at your right eye. Okay, so that's one picture that your brain's seeing. Now, switch hands and hold your hand over your right eye and look at your left eye. Yeah, I don't see quite as good out of my left eye. All right, now you're seeing a different picture, and when you open both eyes and you look together, if you have vision in both eyes, then you see a 3D picture, and that's what happens whenever we use 3D. So you got to have a display that's capable of displaying 120 hertz. What else do you need? Well, if you're going to play computer games, you got to have a 3D video card. Or if you're going to watch 3D movies on your computer. Now, if you're going to watch it on like a home movie type situation, then you're going to need a 3D Blu-ray player or some type of 3D player that's going to play that content. So basically now, instead of having one 1080p signal, you're going to have two 1080p signals, right? Because you have one for each eye. All right, now, and that leaves the last component is 3D glasses, because you've got to have a way to give your eyes those separate signals. So each eye in those glasses gets that slightly different perspective, and when you put it all together, you get 3D. All right, and that's how it works. And so 3D is becoming a popular thing. People are always, okay, because at first it was really expensive, right? It was like 10,000 bucks. So for almost all of us, that's just like, yeah, okay, dream on and go to the movie theater. Of course, a 3D movie ticket is like 1,000 bucks. Oh no, it's only like 15. But it seems like 1,000 bucks, especially when you have 7 people in your family. And I think we've only done that once. When the new Narnia movie came out, I think we went and saw that in 3D, and that was kind of a big thing for us, kind of a big splurge, and we enjoyed that. So the question for you today is that just as we spend time getting ready and building our home movie system and building up entertainment maybe in our computer and getting all the right components, are you getting the right components together for your life? Because we live a life in 3D. And I'm not just talking about the depth and the width and everything of life, but we are in a 3-dimensional life where there is pain, suffering, there's joy, there's excitement, there's hope, anticipation, fear, frustration. We experience all of that. I mean, we're just in the thick of it, it seems like. Sometimes it's like I'm popping my head up in a war zone, just hoping not to get shot at. Because there's so many things going on, so many places to be, so many things to do. And then Christmas comes along and it just compounds all of that. Now we've got to get Christmas presents and we've got to make plans for different family things. And so it gets very intense. It's kind of like that part of the movie where the action gets real intense, and the music starts, getting a little crazy, and the lighting and the special effects start going, and it just really starts building up. That's a little bit of how I experience Christmas. And so we're going to take a few weeks and talk about a few specific things in our 3D world. Some things that perhaps we need to take a look at in our lives. Because in the midst of that war zone that we call life, sometimes we forget about what's really important. And we get focused and sidetracked on the wrong things. And then we end up getting bit or shot in the midst of the action. And so today, specifically, we're going to talk about the role of the parent and parenting in general. Now, I think everyone in here is either been a parent, going to be a parent, is going to be important in a young person's life in some way, maybe not even as a parent, but as a mentor and a guide. And so I really believe that these principles apply to everybody. It's really interesting for the junior high and high school students. You guys are forming how you will be a parent right now. From now until you're about 17 or 18 years old, the way that your parents parent you, whether you may think, I will never be a parent like that. I'm sure my kids are all saying that. I'll never be a parent like that. But believe it or not, you are learning what it means to be a parent for the good or for the bad right now. And so, depending on your perspective, we're all in this process of parenting. Some of you may have adult grown children, but that doesn't mean our role as a parent, it's not like we die as a parent all of a sudden when our child turns 18 or 25 or 40 or 60, that we continue in that advisory role. And so now I will be honest with you, I don't know everything about parenting. I don't have all the magic answers. My children are not perfect. But I do have a lot of experience in parenting, and I really have hit just about every age except for the older teenage years. That is something that our oldest will be 15 this next January, so that's as far as my personal experience in my home, but I have a lot of experience with older teenagers as well. And so I want to share with you some things that I've learned, and maybe this can be an opportunity for us to walk together. Maybe imagine that we're just taking a stroll down the road, kind of like our students do when they go to the gas station after worship, just to take a stroll and just to talk for a little bit about some things. Because especially as we get to Christmas, I think that it can become volatile in the family. There's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of thoughts, expectations in our mind of what Christmas is going to be. And then it all just gets unleashed and unraveled as we approach Christmas. For me, one of the frustrations and struggles that I have a lot of times is I work really hard all year long, and I'm going to have a few days at Christmas to rest and be with my family, and I build it up in my mind how great it's going to be, and then we get there and we're all fighting and yelling at each other. All right? Has anyone ever experienced this? Okay. All right. So many more people than I thought would admit it. All right. So we want to avoid that, don't we? That's not how Christmas ought to be. It ought to be like the video that we just saw about celebrating Jesus, the coming of the Savior, and it ought to be not something we generate artificially or something that we have to go to the store and hear the Christmas music to get inspired by, but it ought to be something deep inside that generates within us, that draws us together as families, that builds us up. And so let's talk about some of the pitfalls that we can fall into along the way, and let's talk about how we ought to be, whether we're older parents, whether we're younger parents. Being a parent is a scary thing. If you, it's been a long time since I've started being a parent, but I remember in the early days, I just felt overwhelmed with it. The loss of sleep, the responsibility of doing the right thing, saying the right thing, knowing when to discipline and when to be flexible. I just felt overwhelmed. I felt uncertain about it. And in fact, just a few years ago when our kids started being teenagers, I had almost that same sensation again. As they it's like my children that were almost adults, they died or something and became these teenage, no offense to them, I love you guys. But they changed, and my relationship with them changed a little bit as they went into those years where they're becoming like adults. And then there's another shift like that happens when they're about 18, 19, 20 years old. And as they change and grow, we have to change and grow in how we deal with them. And I think that if I could pinpoint one, if somebody were to ask me, well, what's the one biggest problem between parents and kids and family with families and the chaos of holidays and different things like that, I would say it's because we as parents, we fail to recognize these transition points. So let's talk about them a little bit. And we're going to talk about them in the context of kind of a fun story. It's in Luke chapter 2. Pastor John started us in Luke chapter 2 last week, so we're going to continue on a little bit later on. We're going to go to verse 41. So if you've got your Bibles or some way you'd like to follow along, then I will invite you to do that. I'm going to go NIV today and stray from my Holman roots for a little bit as we read this story. And this is a great story about Jesus and His parents and a little bit of chaos that they got into as they made their pilgrimage to the holy city. So let's read about this a little bit. Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. And after the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. But they were unaware of it. Okay, so right there, you've probably been in this situation. You can see that there is going to be an encounter with this. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Now, I'm not saying that they're, irresponsible or anything, but if my 11, 12, or 13-year-old son was supposed to be traveling with me on the road, and I hadn't seen him for, say, 5 or 6 hours, I would probably start to be concerned. But, I'm not judging. I'm just pointing out that, okay, I don't know. Maybe I should have been asking that question a little sooner. But let's go back to the verse here. They began looking for him among their relatives and friends. And when they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. So let's just kind of stop right there. Now, one of the first questions that I ask myself, and I think about this story on and off over the years, and I always ask myself, well, who is at fault here? Because on the one hand, can you really say Jesus was at fault, being God and the Messiah and all that? It's kind of hard to point the finger at him. But then, were the parents at fault? Were they just doing what good parents do? And the more that I think about this story, the more that I begin to realize that really no one was at fault here. That really what was happening was just typical, real, 3D life. It was happening, and it happens to all of us. None of us parent in a vacuum. There's no controlled conditions. There's no controlled stimulus. There is just life. One of our 3 things at life's journey is real life, that we're supposed to experience that together. And so real life happens. And there's 2 ways that you can deal with real life. You can keep it to yourself and bottle it all up inside, your feelings and things that are going on in your life, what's happening to you. And you can take all that pressure and all that burden on yourself. Or you can share it and we can do this thing together. We can do this thing called life, this journey of life together. But it's your choice. It's my choice. We have to decide that we're going to share this burden together if we're going to accomplish the purposes of God. All right, so let's think about the story a little bit, some of the particulars. All right, first of all, it's a long walk, okay, or / ride. We don't know really if they had some animals to ride on, if they're walking, probably walking. And so they've gone a day's journey at least, and now they're going all the way back. Now, for me, I've been in this situation as a parent, and the problem is traveling from the place where you become angry and frustrated to the destination, and that long journey, you have all that time to get more frustrated and more angry and more, the rage begins to build. And so I'm sure that by the time Jesus' parents got back to the temple there, they were really ready to lay hands on him, and not in a prayerful manner. So they arrived there, and then something surprising happens. It's kind of like you just know your child they've done this terrible thing, you found the evidence, and you're going to nail them, and then only to arrive and find out that the situation is not quite what you thought. All right, so this is where we're at. Everyone heard him and was amazed. I'm picking up in verse 47. At his understanding and his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Okay, so she's still a little bit ticked off at him, you know. She's still a little bit just, why have you done this to me? You made me walk a whole day's journey to come back and find you, okay? I mean, I don't know. You know, the scriptures record it this way. I think it was that's probably a little bit dry. I think there's probably a little more emotion in her voice as she was making that statement than what we might be able to read here. Who knows? Problem with the written word, it's hard to see what the emotions are at. Let's read on. Your father and I, okay, so now it's like, well, I'm going to draw husband in here with me because we're going to both gang up on you now. Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you. And so then he asks, you know, of course it's his turn for the comeback. He says, well, why were you searching for me, he asked. Didn't you know I had to be in my father's house? But they did not understand what he was saying to them. And then they went down to Nazareth with them Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in the favor of God and man. And you know, as I think about that statement, his mother treasured all these things in her heart, I think she began to think about that situation later on as she cooled off, and as the realness, the 3D-ness, there's not a word called 3D-ness, I don't think, the situation became very diminished in her mind. She began to think and about that situation, and that puts her a little bit more in our place, because this, of course, happened a long time ago, and we're just thinking in hindsight about this situation. But it's a common situation that we find ourselves in as parents. We're just trying to survive, to be good parents, to train our children up. And they're just trying to do the same thing. They're just trying to understand the world and see the world for the way that it is, understand what's happening and find out who they are and find their identity and to grow in that. And so it's a struggle for all of us. And so I think the foundational point that I want to make as we get into this is that we're all on the same team. We're all on the same team. You know, it hurts my heart when I hear of families that haven't spoken for decades. They have adult children that, you know, something happened and now they've, you know, decades have gone by since words have been spoken, and entire lifetimes perhaps even come and go while there has been damage to the relationship between parents and their children, and even other relationships, you know, between siblings and different things. And all because somewhere in that process of living life and experiencing real life, things get so bad in our relationships with those family members that we forget that we're on the same team. We forget that we're trying to accomplish something together, and we go our separate ways. So let's talk about these phases of parenting. There's really 3. Now, of course, we could debate this, you know, we could make it 12, or, you know, there's an unlimited way that we could probably develop these. But I think there's really 3 major, perhaps seasons is a good word, perhaps periods is a good word. You know, there are these 3 times in our parenting when our mindset has to change. We have to change how we parent, how we interact with our kids, if we are going to play the role that we ought to play. And so let's talk about these a little bit. When our children are born, or when we adopt them if they're young, this first phase, I think, probably goes from pregnancy all the way to, I don't know, maybe 11-ish. Depending on your child, you know, we all mature at different rates and we all have different experiences, and so that, you know, can change those times. But I'd say from around pregnancy to 11 years old, that's the phase that I call the provider disciplinarian phase. All right, and if you're going to take little notes or something, then that's going to be your first little note there, that provider disciplinarian phase. All right, that's the phase where your child really doesn't see or perceive the whole of life. Some of that is developmentally because they've not grown up enough, you know, and experienced enough of life to really see the big picture, to understand what's dangerous and what's not dangerous. They live in kind of an imaginary world because that's how they deal with stress, and that's how they learn and understand things. And just like us, our imaginations aren't quite as exciting as theirs are, but that's how we learn too. We imagine how something is, and then we test it to see if it's really that way, right? That's how we learn. And that's how they do too. It's just that we can kind of pinpoint what something is. We can look at that speaker over there and guess, yeah, that's probably a speaker, and sound probably comes out of that, and it probably takes power and a signal, and that's because we have experience. But if I was a 3-year-old and I saw that, it could be a magic black box that I could make 3 wishes and they would come true. Who knows, because you haven't had any experience with that. So you're in that phase where you are the provider. You have to provide completely for them for the most part. You have to teach them right from wrong, and it's a hard period of time because you lose a lot of sleep over things, and because they're up and they're sick, there's a lot that goes into that, and especially when they're really little, it's really hard because you almost feel like you can't ever get away from them. You can't go out on dates, and you can't do things, go on vacation and stuff, just because they're so little and fragile, and so it can put a lot of pressure on the marriage and relationships. And then when parents and in-laws get involved and they try to do their little parental duty, then it just can get crazy. And so that phase, there are some tactics that I want to share with you, some things that perhaps if you're in that phase or you're headed into that phase, that maybe will help you, if nothing else, manage your expectations so that you can understand what that's like. Because most of us, we get our information from movies and Hollywood. And I tell you what, being a parent in Hollywood and being a parent in real 3D life is 2 completely different things. All right? They make it all look good and on soap operas and these different TV shows and everything, or unreasonably terrible when it's really not that bad. And so we get all this bad information, and we walk into a parenting situation and we find that it's not the way that we thought that it was. Well, one thing you need to understand in this early age is that 18 months, that's kind of that toddler phase, children have the ability to understand rewards and punishments. All right? And this is kind of the first big transition, all right, for your infant. Because when they're infants, you cannot really spank them. It's not going to help them. All right? They don't really understand right and wrong, and they don't understand good and bad and those things. But when they get about 18 months, they can. All right, and sometimes parents start a little bit too soon, and it's confusing for the kids, but sometimes parents wait too long, and then they're in a world of hurt because now they learn they can just do whatever they want, and they ended up hurting themselves or getting in a lot of trouble. And I think the one thing that kids don't understand, but that we do, is that punishment is for their benefit. A good parent punishes their child, period. A bad parent chooses not to punish their child. It's just that simple. If you love your child, you will discipline them. Because when you discipline them, you are protecting them from all the chaos of the world. If you don't teach your child to respect your authority, they'll never hold down a job. They'll never be able to accomplish things in life because they won't respect authority. They won't learn about God and His authority. And so we have to learn that. It's very important, and it's hard. I hate disciplining. I just want to let my kids basically do whatever they want to do. All right, that's the honest truth. Because 1, I don't want to take the time to discipline because it takes time. But 2, I don't want to go through the emotional trauma of disciplining them and then feeling bad about it for the next however many hours. But I also know that if I love my kids and I want to see them grow up to be young men and women of God, that I have to discipline them. And so we have this war, and it's very difficult. But that's really the point that starts, is around that 18-month age. Now, what do we discipline? How do you decide, well, this is a terrible thing, this isn't so bad? Here's the thing, there's really just one thing, all right? And I kind of alluded to it a while ago. We need to discipline the rebellious behavior. Not the accidents, not that's the first time they've ever made breakfast and they made a mess. Well, you can't punish them for that because they, now if they do it like 10 times and you've told them, this is how you clean up, don't walk away and leave your mess like this, well then that's a rebellious act, right? It's not childishness, what I call childishness. So we don't want to punish the childishness. We want to punish the rebellion. That's the part that will damage them the most in the long run. All right, so we've got to show them love. We've got to show them safety within rules. What's really interesting about children is that children that grow up in homes where there's really no rules, they have issues later on in life with feeling safe. They have issues with knowing how to make decisions, because the rules help us. They give us a kind of a shield so that we know this is bad, this will hurt us, this is good, this will prosper us. And so if we fail as parents to teach them these things in this age period, then we're crippling them, and they're going to have to either learn those things as adults, or they're going to fail as adults in a lot of ways. So I'm kind of moving through this fast. There's a lot more we could say for sure about that, but those are some things that are very important. We've got to show them love, because if they don't receive love from us, well, then all the rules and all the disciplining in the world isn't going to do anything for them, because they will never be able to show love. They'll never be able to understand what love is. So there's a balance there in that time. Now, 0 to 5 is especially crucial. Children learn about 55 to 65% of what they're going to learn cognitively as far as problem solving and those kind of things before that age of 5. And so you've got to really invest in those early years. And if you have older children, you've got to teach those older children to help you as parents, to be good models for those younger kids, because they will have a parental impact. I guarantee you our older kids, to a large extent, have parented the younger kids, even if they, not directly, but indirectly, because they learn from them. The younger kids have a respect for the older kids, and they see what they do, and they will learn from that. So if you train those older kids up right, then that will be a blessing to you as you parent those younger kids. All right, let's go on to the second phase. So we get to about 10, 11, 12, and the fun begins, and we transition into what I call the coaching phase, okay, or the idiot phase. Whichever you prefer, but to be polite to our lovely junior high and high school students, we'll call it the coaching phase. Now, there's a lot of great things about this phase. They can go to the bathroom on their own. That's a bonus. They have the ability to clean their room. While they can't always execute that task, they do have the ability to do it. So there's a lot of great things about this age. It's a fun age. They're exploring and learning things at an accelerated rate for the first time. And so it's a great age, but it can be very frustrating. A lot of the frustration is our choice. All right, we put on ourselves because we don't transition as parents, all right? And basically every mistake that I'm going to share here, I've made all these mistakes, and that's why I can share them with you today. If you don't transition in your mind from that of the disciplinarian provider to the coach, you guys are going to have World War III all through those teenage years, all right? So it's something that you've got to get in your mind. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that you stop parenting. That doesn't mean you stop teaching them right from wrong. That doesn't mean that there's not discipline and consequences for bad behavior. But what that means is that your role's got to change. You've got to realize that your goal is not to keep them a child forever, but it's to train them up to be an adult. And they're just a few years away from that. And I think that's what's hard for us as parents. When we get to that age, we forget that they're just a few years away from adulthood. In many cultures, they would already be considered an adult. Even in our culture at one time, when you got about 13, 14 years old, you were working and you were working out on the farm, and you were, for all practical purposes, an adult. Now, our culture, we've kind of delayed that. When I was in the teenage years, probably 17, 18 was when that transition happened. Probably now it's more like 20, 21, 22, 23. And so as things change in our culture, that makes our job a little bit different as we approach these years. So that's the first thing I think that we can do as parents for our own health and for our children's health, is to recognize that our place has to change. And I think it's interesting here that in the passage that we read, Jesus is about that age. He's about that age where his parents have gone and notice, I think one of the reasons why they didn't look for him is he was probably a pretty responsible child, and they trusted him, and he pretty well handled things. And I have to be honest with you, all of my children at that age were like that. They were very responsible and trustworthy and predictable. All right, but then hormones kick in, And we kind of take a few steps back for a while. Now, I'm not necessarily saying Jesus did anything wrong here, but what I'm saying is I think in Mary and Joseph's mind, perhaps they didn't make that transition there. And so their expectations frustrated them to some extent. And so certainly for us, as we make that transition, especially if you've had several kids and they're pretty close in age and you feel pretty confident as a parent and you've got a lot of experience under your belt and you think, yeah, I can do this, I can handle this. And then all of a sudden you get to that teenage phase and it all heck breaks loose and we all get crazy and start having bad Christmases. And so that's what we want to prevent. And the first step there is for us changing now. As we make that transition, I think we have to choose which things we are going to make important in terms of conflict, because there are going to be conflicts. Even if you're the best parent in the world, there's going to be conflicts because children, or young adults, as I should probably say, they begin to test the boundaries. It's just like explorers. We're built that way. We just want to explore farther, and we want to know more, and we want to search more, and we want to do more, experience more. But we can't blame our kids for doing that same thing. That's human nature. That's how we are. We just want to expand what the horizon is. If it's this far, then we want to know what's on the other side of that. And that's what they're doing. And so what happens, though, is they're exploring and they're testing the boundaries. Some of those boundaries are dangers for them. Some of those boundaries, our experience has taught us we don't want to cross that boundary. We want to go in a different direction. And that's where the conflict happens. And so, as we think about this coaching phase, I think one thing that's really important is that we invest time. Now, you may think to yourself in your mind, well, it's important while my kids are young. You hear people say this all the time. It's important while my kids are young to spend time with them. And it is, all right? That certainly is. But this phase, this 11, 12 to about 18, is probably the most crucial phase. And it's hard to spend time with them because before, what spending time with them meant was you're going to rock them to sleep, you're going to read them a story, you're going to play a board game. Those things are easy comparatively. Okay, they may not be easy as you're experiencing them, but later on as you get into your challenges, you realize those things are easy. All right, now hanging out with them means rock climbing and lifting weights and playing World of Warcraft and doing makeup and nails and all that stuff. And those things are a little more advanced, at least for this 30-some-odd-year-old guy here. So we get into a situation where investing our time not only means the time itself, but learning new things, learning how to spend time in that new relationship. And so that's kind of an undiscovered country that we have to experience as parents. But there is light at the end of the tunnel at this phase. For me, my goal, and it really has almost always been, since my children were very young, my goal has been to raise up my kids to be men and women of God, to be independent, to make wise financial choices, to make wise choices with whom they're going to marry, to make wise choices with their career and how they're going to serve the Lord, to use their gifts. That's my primary goal. And I think for some of us, our goals are more emotionally driven. We're thinking, well, I want my child to be this, or I want them to perform well in school, or I want them to be great at sports. And so we put these expectations, maybe things that are important to us, on them, and they're not important to them. And the reason why that's probably a little bit unhealthy is because that's not compatible with what our biblical goal should be. And our goal should be to prepare our children for the ministry that's to come in their lives, to be adults. Just like Jesus' parents, they were preparing him. We don't know a lot about Jesus' childhood, unfortunately, but we know that Mary and Joseph trained him up in the way of the Lord, in the Jewish tradition, to observe the Sabbath and all the laws, and that was their goal. They were training him up for the purposes that God had for him. And that has to be our goal. And once we set that goal, then we need to ask ourselves, all right, is this path, this problem that I'm having, is it so that this goal can be fulfilled? Or is it because I'm feeling emotionally insecure as a parent? Just something that we've got to think about. All right, we've got to move on to the next phase. Now the last phase, and we could probably divide this phase up into several categories, but I'm going to, for sake of time, put it all together in one today. This is kind of the 19 plus, and this is the advising phase. All right, this is another time when we struggle again to transition as parents from the coach that we just got used to being to the advisor now that we have to become, because there comes a time, whether it's a student who's in a class and they take their final exam, whether it's someone that's gone to the military academy and they come down to the very end, there comes a time when our time of training, our time of growing our children up, it has to be put to the test. It has to be. And we've been slowly doing this, one thing at a time. At first we, are teaching them just to feed themselves and use the bathroom themselves. Then we're, in the teenage years, we're teaching them to drive and get a job and be a responsible employee and all these different things. And then when they get to that 19 plus phase, now this is it. Whether we have done our job right or not, they have come to the place in our culture where they are going to experience the fullness of life. The responsibilities of money, the responsibilities of education and job and all those things, they all come to bear. And this can be a difficult time for us as parents because we're still in that coaching mentality. We're still thinking, okay, I've got to, it all depends on me, and if I coach them right and they need to do these certain things, and now the time has come for the test that we have to allow them. And this is probably the most painful part. We have to allow them to make some bad choices. Because see, it's no longer our place to make those choices for them. And that's going to be hard for me. I know that for me as a parent to watch my children make some poor choices, that's going to be hard for me. But if we'll be honest with ourselves, that's how we learned a lot of things, didn't we? We made some bad choices, and then we regretted it, but we learned from our mistakes. And that's when the training that we've invested becomes crucial. Because as they come up against difficulties in life and hardships and struggles, they're going to fall back on the things that we taught them. Now, does this mean we just walk away and send them a Christmas card once a year and say, hey, I hope your life is going good, call me if you need something? No, by no means. All right, we do not cease our role as a parent, but again, it transitions. All right, now we're an advisor. So what does that mean? What does it mean to be an advisor? I think that that age group probably struggles the most with arrogance, because you think that you're strong, you're young, you feel confident, and you think that you know everything, and you're just ready to take on the world. And we see that and we recognize, wow, that is a formula for disaster. All right? Because we all felt like that at one time, and then we made a disaster of things, and then we began to learn from those things. And so it's in those times that we have to advise some of those thoughts. So as we hear statements, as we see some things, then that's when we begin to offer, well, have you thought about this? Or, maybe you send a Facebook message or an email, hey, here's an alternative. Or we begin to offer them some guidance as an advisor. All right, and that's different from the coaching, because when you're a coach, you're kind of shouting and you're pushing them this way, and you say, okay, go this way, don't go right. It's just like a football coach, they're out there just, you got the microphone on and they're all worked up and they're, do this, and they're just all emotionally involved, and it looks like they're one, yell away from a heart attack. And then all of a sudden now, we've gone to that advising role where we're not shouting across the field anymore, but we're gently guiding. We're gently offering a way, perhaps an alternative, perhaps a path, to help them as they make that final transition into being a mature adult. And as they get older and older, it's not like it stops after college or through their 20s or 30s. That continues on. You continue to share, and it really, if you think about it, it's a logical thing. The truth is, older people, little gray hair is a blessing, because with that gray hair comes the experience and the benefit of wisdom that comes from seeing things in life, from experiencing different economies, different cultural changes and shifts, from experiencing different jobs, and there's so many things that happen in life that you can't teach in a book. You can't teach it in a classroom. You can't teach it in a sermon like this even. But you have to experience those things. And then the information that you glean from those experiences is invaluable. And so as young people, like for people my age, in their 20s and their 40s even, we need to humble ourselves a little bit and realize that our parents and our grandparents even, of course mine have all passed away, but get to the age where my parents are even getting a little bit older, although they look very young and they're in very good health. But it happens, as time goes on, that we age and we need to humble ourselves and learn from their experiences. We should be old enough at that point to realize that we don't know everything, and to realize that we have a lot to glean from their wisdom. If you think about it, when you go to Lowe's, who do you look for? Do you look for, when you got a project going on, do you look for the young guy that's just been working there for a few years? Or do you look for the old guy that's about 60, years old, that's probably done it all, built it all, seen it all, done that project? Who do you look for? Well, I know who I look for. I look for the oldest guy I could possibly find, because I know that he's going to have seen that screw before, or he's going to have seen that tool, and I can just start talking a little bit and describe what I want to do, and he'll show, oh, you need this glue, you need this product, because he's experienced that. After you live a while, you just experience some things. And so I think for some of us, we as parents, as older parents, we're still in the coaching phase. And so we're just hammering, and we create an obstacle for them. And we make it hard for them to have a relationship with us. And so we just need to back off a little bit and play more of the advisor. Others of us are just kind of like, well, you're 18, have a nice life. If you need something, maybe I'll get it for you for Christmas. And we just completely let go and we walk away. And that's not the healthy thing either. We've got to go back to the beginning where we recognize that it's a team effort. We're in this thing together. It's hard. Think back when you were a child. It's hard. It's hard to be a child. It's hard to be a teenager. It can be relentless at school. And your kids may come home and say, oh, I had a great day. Yeah, everything is fine, blah, blah, blah. When they had a terrible day and all their friends were mean to them and made fun of them and just, they had a horrible time. It's just so confusing and frustrating. And so for you, maybe you're just in the thick of it and you've lost all compassion and, you're just one spanking away from whatever. Remember that. Have compassion on them. Give more love than you give discipline. Some of you need to give probably a little more discipline. I've noticed one thing with my age group and a little bit younger than me is that and I think some of it's out of laziness, but I think some of it's just out of not knowing that we don't do our job in investing in our children by loving them and disciplining them. And they're really the same thing. If I, as an adult, this isn't a criticism of my parents at all, because they did a pretty decent job as parents. But if I criticized them at all, I would say, I wish you would have disciplined me more. I wish you would have been harder on me. I wish you would have prevented me from doing this or doing that. Now that's the opposite of what my children say, and that's the opposite of what I would have said when I was that age. But it's because now I'm just old enough, and I only have just a few gray hairs, but I have just enough gray hairs to realize that it was for my benefit. That the self-control that I had and the patience that I have, although I don't have a lot, but it began being developed when I was young, when my parents began to teach me self-control and those things. And so we ought to be wise and shrewd as parents. The only real 3D, and as cool as it is, and I love 3D, I love to watch things, I'm kind of techie a little bit like that, and there's nothing like an action-packed movie in 3D. But we need to spend time getting our components together for real life. We need to spend time doing that. And all the books that we love, and the movies that we love, and our hobbies, and all those things that we barely have time for, those need to take a second seat to the things that really matter. And that's the people in our lives, our spouses, our kids, our parents, all of our family, our friends, our church family. All those are the things that we've got to spend time building up. we've had a great first year and we're well into our second year, but we have a lot of work to do as a church. We've got a lot of distance to travel to get to that next phase. We've kind of gone from that disciplinarian infancy stage as a church to that teenage stage. We're kind of in that right now, where we're starting to do some things, we're starting to figure some things out. We've added sort of ministries, and the Lord's blessed us with more people, but we've got to move through these years to the next phase so that we can begin to stand on our own even more. And so we have a lot to do and accomplish as a church. And if we're distracted by all these other things, then it's going to be hard to accomplish those purposes. And we're going to struggle. I don't know about you, but one thing that I have learned in life is to not run from God. Running from God always ends badly. And I can't tell you what that looks like for you. Only you can know that. But one thing that I've learned is that God always makes it clear. If we're feeling unclear, it's because there's something within us. Either we're not listening, we've got sin, like was mentioned, like Randy was talking about during the focus time. Sin in our life is blinding us. Our own arrogance and pride is blinding us. But we've got to get in line with doing what God wants us to do. And we've got to demonstrate in a 3D way what it means to be a believer. Because, guys, our culture and our world is decaying rapidly. And the salt that is keeping the meat of the world from rotting is becoming less and less. And so the responsibility that we have is immense. And I don't know about you, but at the end of the day and at the end of my life, I want to be found faithful. And I know that I've made a lot of mistakes, and there's all kinds of problems and things. I should have turned left when I turned right and vice versa. And I know you feel the same way, and sometimes it's hard to get up every day and to serve God faithfully. Well, not sometimes, it's hard every day to get up and serve Him faithfully. But I think if we're honest with ourselves deep down inside, we know that the truth is that when we choose to follow God, we're investing in peace and prosperity. We're investing in happiness. And that may not mean that things go perfect in our lives. That may mean they go worse as far as worldly perceptions go. But then when we follow God, we know that inner joy, that inner sense of accomplishment and knowing who we are in Christ will be found. And that when we're running away, we know eventually it's going to catch up with us. And not only are we going to hurt all the people around us, we're going to hurt ourselves. So we need to take some time, I think, and just pray a little bit as Annette comes and plays, to think about this time between now and Christmas, and to think about what's going on. I know a lot of people are sick. A number are struggling with issues with job and career. A number of people are struggling with issues with parents and kids. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of pressure on all of us. And sometimes that pressure has nothing to do with us. It's just living in a fallen world. It's just sin around us that it happens to us in a 3D way. And there's nothing we can do about that. But there's another portion of our hardships that are self-inflicted because we've chosen to go our own way. We've chosen to focus on the wrong things. And so right now, it's those things that I want you to think about. And just ask yourself, are you building the components to a system in your life that is going to bring you blessing and is going to bless the people around you and it's going to please the Lord? Or have you rigged a system that's far from God, that's taking you farther away, that's taking you to the precipice of a dangerous cliff that can wreck your life? And really only you can know that. And so let's take an opportunity and allow the Holy Spirit to help us see maybe some things that we've not seen yet. Let's pray. God, search our hearts this afternoon as we come to you in prayer, as we surrender our will to yours. God, I really believe that right now there are a few people that just need to let go of some things. That they're just hanging on to like they're hanging onto a rail at the edge of a mountain. And they just need to let go and fall into your arms. God, I think that there are many, and probably myself included, that have just been led astray a little bit by the world and have gotten confused about what's really important. And we've built up these kingdoms for ourselves that are ultimately going to fall down and maybe crash, take us down with them. So God, I ask for freedom now, that you would free us from that prison that we have built ourselves into, where we feel like we've just got to have that one more thing, or that car, or that house, or that job, so that we can be happy. And we know deep down inside that if we gained everything we wanted, we would be the most miserable of men and women. So Lord, as the ultimate parent, I pray that you would discipline us, that you would coach us and advise us to walk in your ways, to walk in your paths, that we would be found faithful men and women of God that love our children and are willing to invest and demonstrate that by the way that we live our lives. God, I thank you for every single person, every child, every man, every woman in this room. God, I thank you that you have brought us together for such a time as this. And that as we walk this journey of life together, God, I pray that we would share our burdens together, that no one would be left behind, that no one would be cast aside, but that we would journey together to accomplish your purposes, and that we would find joy for that journey. That when some of us are down, the others would lift us up. God, I believe there are several here today that just need to repent of some sin that they've got caught up in their life, and it's causing them feelings of guilt and frustration and disappointment and depression. And so God, I pray that you would just work in those hearts to bring repentance. God, it's so hard when we're stuck in a pit to get back out. Oh, it's hard. But we know, Lord, that you have the power to deliver us. And I pray that you would, perhaps even today. God, thank you for the time that we've had and the time that is coming up and the remainder of this day. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.